This is that comp time I was telling you about. Remember when I let y'all out early the other day? That was so I could be late one day and not get in trouble. If we buy that. I think I want this one. Yes. All right. I think I'm ready to go. We'll see. Well, we're a little bit behind, and I apologize for that. If you're just joining us online, you haven't missed anything, and your feed's not broke, and all that stuff. This is our Sunday morning Bible class, auditorium Bible class for May the 12th, Mother's Day. Happy Mother's Day to all the moms, and we're glad you could be with us. We are wrapping up, we're in the process of wrapping up. We're kind of circling the airport trying to find a way to land this plane, but we're wrapping up our series on the unseen realm, where we have been exploring a number of things, spiritual beings and whatnot. And so that is a really concise summary, and you can look back over the past few weeks if you want to catch up on that. But as we're winding down, we want to talk about the ending a little bit. And I apologize if you were in the Revelation class on Wednesday night. You can kind of take a nap right now because you're going to have heard some of this already. I always marvel at how God works, because Tim contacted me and said, I'm not feeling good. Can you cover Revelation? And you know, that's a blessing to have that kind of, the other night I had the power go out at my house and I had to wait on an electrician. I called Larry, hey, can you cover Revelation 14? There's not a lot of places that you can do that. You know what I mean? There's not a lot of places where you can call and go, hey, in a couple hours, can you teach Revelation? Because most people would be like, And so Tim called me and said, hey, can you cover this? And I was like, it's funny, because I thought I had missed a week because I was out. And I was like, oh, we're in 15, or where are we at? And I called Larry, and I'm like, where'd you end up? Did you end up in 14? Or he's like, no, we're already to 17. And I went, well, that's cool, because that's what I'm prepping for Sunday morning. And so, you know, God knows what he's doing, even if so anytime it looks like we have our act together, it's not us. If it falls apart, that's definitely me. But if it's working, it's probably God and not me. But I want to start not in Revelation. I want to start in Colossians. And so, but to get there, we're going to do a little bit of recap. You remember our basic premise that we've been going through in this class is we've started in Genesis, and in Genesis there are the three great rebellions. That's one of the things that we've talked about that doesn't get talked about a lot. The first one, of course, you've heard all your life, and that is the rebellion in the garden, where the serpent, who was obviously not a snake, because, you know, we've covered all that, but when the serpent seduces Eve into taking the forbidden fruit, Eve then gives that to Adam, and the whole thing falls apart because of that. That's our first one. Then you from Genesis 3, that's where that is, all the way down to Genesis 11, there's like this downward spiral of human depravity that just keeps getting worse and worse and worse and worse. But so from Genesis 3, the second one is Genesis 6. And in Genesis 6, we get the story of the sons of God coming down and having relations with the daughters of men. And that is expanded Then we've talked about already in some Second Temple Jewish literature, specifically the book of First Enoch is one of the ones that we focused in on the most. That is not scripture. It's not part of our canon, but it was the stories that were encased in that were part of what informed many of the New Testament writers. They knew those stories. They had read those stories. Those stories were part of the framework of how they understood the spiritual realm. It's the same thing with us. We don't realize it, but a lot of our understanding about the spiritual realm is formed by Dante, is formed by Milton, is formed by those people who are not, it's not scripture, but we have these ideas of what heaven and hell and the spiritual realm and all this look like. I would even say my generation, Frank Peretti, contributed to that. Some of us, Tim LaHaye. There's all these other things. And so that's all that is. Enoch calls those the watchers. And so if you hear me talking about that, that's what I'm talking about. That's Genesis 6. That's the second great rebellion. And then the third rebellion is Genesis 11. And in Genesis 11, that's when the Tower of Babel, or Babel, however you want to say it, either way is correct. Tower of Babel, and basically humans are trying to build, this story gets, we'll come back to that. I'm about to rabbit trail. That's the third rebellion where God finally says, okay, look, I'm going to disperse the nations, and I'm going to put like regional managers over each one of you. And so there's going to be a spiritual being over this nation and a spiritual being over, and I'm going to put these part of my cabinet, if you will, for lack of better terms, over each one of these. Well, what happens is those spiritual beings then rebel, and we get that in Deuteronomy 32 and Psalm 82. We get a little bit of a picture of what that looks like. Those spiritual beings rebel, and they start to accept worship for themselves. They start to try to elevate themselves to the level of God and to the level of Yahweh. And that's the same basic temptation that the serpent is using in Genesis 3, right? Did God really say you were going to die? Nah, he didn't really say that, did he? He's just scared that if you eat this, you're going to be like him. And so that's the same basic rebellion. We're going to be like God. And when they do that, then God says, okay, you want to chase after all these other gods, little g, then I'm going to just start over right here with this guy named Abram, and I'm going to create my own portion, my own inheritance. That's the scriptural words that are used there. I'm going to create my own portion, and that portion, Israel, is going to be my inheritance, my people, holy and set apart. And what does he promise Abram? Through you, all nations will be blessed. That's Genesis 12. And at that point, God is already thinking of how he's going to fix all of this. You with me so far? So now Colossians. And that's where I want to start, and then we'll jump into Revelation a little bit. Colossians chapter 2, verse 15. And he's talking about Jesus. And having disarmed the powers and authorities, that's the spiritual beings in the heavenly realms, we've already established that. Having disarmed the powers and authorities, he made a public spectacle of them, triumphing over them by the cross. And that's where I want to start, because I want us to understand what that's talking about. So let's discuss that a little bit. First question is, how did Jesus disarm the powers and authorities? That's a unique term that's there, because he doesn't just say that he beat them, he says he disarmed them. What do you think that means? Let's see if we can unpack this a little bit. Anybody want to jump in there? This is an easy one. Jason. Yes. Absolutely. They're humiliated. Made a spectacle, put them to shame. What's another version? He made a show of them, is what King James says. There's all kind of translations of that. Chris? Absolutely. By canceling out our debts that we owe, there is nothing that can be held against us being humanity. And so, Emily? Yeah, he defeated death. Paul will say that multiple times, that he triumphed over death because, I mean, what power does any of these spiritual beings have? They don't have any power. The only power they have is what they've assumed based on what God's let them have. Does that make sense? I mean, they don't have any. I get frustrated when people will portray this dualism of Satan and God as these two equal forces that are at war. It's not even close. You've got God, and then you've got Satan, and yeah, he's running around making a mess of things, but only because God lets him. He has no power. He has he's not even on the same playing field as Yahweh. That's the point. And so anyway, yeah, death is one of the only things they had, because when we died, the Jews believed you were sent to Sheol, the realm of the dead, and that was under the earth. And we talked about, when we were looking at Genesis 3 and the Genesis 3 rebellion, when the serpent is cursed, he's thrown down to the earth. He's going to eat dirt. Well, snakes don't really eat dirt, right? That's metaphorical language for being under the earth. So the idea is he's thrown down into this realm of the dead and kind of sets himself up then as king. If I can't be king of heaven, I'll be king of the ghetto. I mean, it's kind of like a mafia mindset, right? Does that make sense? And so now all these humans that God loves so much, when they die, they're going to come here and then they're mine, because I'm the ruler of this realm. And so when that's taken away, that's effectively disarming. That took away one of his weapons. What else? Anybody else got anything? Leanne? Right? Absolutely. Very good. Yes, the Jewish religious hierarchy, the Jewish religious system, and that is all the law. We talked about a couple of weeks ago when we were looking at Galatians and Paul's explanation of the law. That law that then they had taken and created all these other laws to try to protect you from getting to that, right? And so, they had, in addition to the law that God gave down, then there's all these other, I don't remember how much it is. Some people say 600, some people say 1,200. I don't know. There's all these other laws that are then put on there so that you won't get close to breaking that law. And that creates this hierarchy. It creates this system, and you had to do this, and you had to do this, and you had to do this, and you had to do this. And if you didn't do this every year and this and there's all these little check boxes, and it was impossible to keep up with all that. And when Jesus dies on the cross, that stuff kind of falls away, is unnecessary, Paul would say. That's what we looked at in Galatians. Gene.
Verse 13 and
blotting out the handwriting ordinances against us. That's verse 13 and 14 that basically corroborates or confirms what we're talking about right here with the both what Chris said about the debts that we owed and what Leanne said about the religious system that we address those debts. Both of those are addressed right there. Go ahead. Absolutely. That's a great point. And I'm going to try to restate this as best I can. Gene says he likes the King James. He made an open show of them. He made other versions of spectacle or whatever. But it was something that was very public and very broad. It was there was no doubt that Jesus had triumphed over death because of his death and then his resurrection. It was not one of those things that was hidden under the rug or whatever. This was a very public spectacle. And then we've talked about how spiritual warfare is a lot less confronting demons and doing all this stuff like you see in the movies. It's much more bringing souls into the kingdom, because you're moving souls from one camp to the other. You're moving spiritual territory from one camp to the other. And we do that in a public way. We're baptized publicly. We confess publicly. We repent publicly. If you were here Wednesday night, you got to see Marco be baptized. And I love, we try to respect everybody. Some people are very private and they only want a few people here, and we try to respect that. I love it when they want to have a whole bunch of people. Marco was like, tell everybody, I don't care. And I love that, because that's what it's about. We want it to be a spectacle. We want it to be an open show. We want it to be publicly proclaimed. That's part of the whole point of doing it the way we do it. But anyway, good point. Anybody else? I don't want to step on anybody before we jump into our next section here. Okay, so let's look at, if you have your Bibles, go ahead and turn over to Revelation at chapter 17. And this is going to tie together eventually. Hopefully we'll have enough time to tie it together. Revelation chapter 17, and we'll start reading at verse 1. One of the seven angels who had the seven bowls came and said to me, "Come, I'll show you the punishment of the great prostitute who sits by many waters. With her the kings of the earth committed adultery, and the inhabitants of the earth were intoxicated with the wine of her adulteries." Then the angel carried me away in the spirit into a wilderness. There I saw a woman sitting on a scarlet beast that was covered with blasphemous names and had 7 heads and 10 horns. The woman was dressed in purple and scarlet and was glittering with gold, precious stones, and pearls. She held a golden cup in her hand filled with abominable things and the filth of her adulteries. The name written on her forehead was a mystery: Babylon the Great, the mother of prostitutes and of the abominations of the earth. I saw that the woman was drunk with the blood of God's holy people, the blood of those who bore testimony to Jesus. And when I saw her, I was greatly astonished. Then the angel said to me, "Why are you astonished? I will explain to you the mystery of the woman and of the beast she rides, which has the 7 heads and the 10 horns. The beast which you saw once was, now is not, and yet will come up out of the abyss and go to its destruction. The inhabitants of the earth, whose names have not been written in the book of life from the creation of the world, will be astonished when they see the beast, because it once was, now is not, and yet will come. This calls for a mind with wisdom. The 7 heads are 7 hills on which the woman sits. There are also 7 kings. 5 have fallen. One is, the other has not yet come. But when he does come, he must remain for only a little while. The beast who once was and now is not is an 8th king. He belongs to the 7 and is going to his destruction. We're going to stop because y'all are. I'm sure you understand everything right there, right? It's pretty self-explanatory, right? Just a joke. So Revelation 17 is a part of this judgment series that's 15 through 18 really of Revelation, and a lot of it is the same thing over and over. You know, it's 7 judgments and 7 judgments and 7 judgments, and it starts to be like, if you read Revelation in a linear chronological pattern, it starts to not make sense because it's not written that way. It's like a movie. Have you ever seen those movies where they show you a scene and it's from one character's point of view, and then that scene ends and they go back and show you the same scene from a different character's point of view, and then they show you, you know what I'm talking about? And it's kind of like that. That's a bad metaphor. It's not really the perfect, but it kind of something we can wrap our mind around. It makes sort of sense. So the central character here, though, is Babylon. Babylon is not just this empire from Daniel. It's much more than that. It is representative of Rome in this context, but it's much more than that, because it's also representative of empire and power, and any kind of empire and power that will set itself up to be on the level with God. When your rules and your understanding and your technology and your whatever, when your all those things can be lifted up, and now you see yourself on the same level with God. That's that same kind of Babylon spirit, Babylon empire. You with me on that? And so we kind of commented Wednesday night a little bit. I don't want to rabbit trail too much, but you know, we get into this, and you hear people, oh, well, this is China, or this is Russia, or this is whatever. I mean, if we're honest with ourselves, this could very well be the United States of America, because we elevate ourselves up, and now we think we decide which babies live and die, or we decide what gender is what, or you see how we're putting ourselves on a level with God. And so that's I'm not trying to get political or culture war stuff, but I think we've got to be honest. A lot of times it's easy for us to sit in our comfort and look at everybody else and point fingers, but I think we have to be honest about ourselves as well, that sometimes those fingers are pointed back at us. Babylon is one of these symbols that runs all the way through Scripture from the beginning. And this is what I want to show you, because I think once we get this, then the whole thing makes a lot more sense. Not just Revelation, but everything between Genesis and Revelation. And so we've talked about the rebellions. If the first one being Eden, the second one being the Watchers, and the third one being Babel, the Tower of Babel. Now here's why that is significant. The Hebrew word there, it can be Babel, B-A-B-E-L. It can be Bavel, B-A-V-E-L. Either one is the same. It doesn't matter. There's a Hebrew letter that can be transliterated either way. Does not matter. But it's a play on words, because it sounds a lot like the Hebrew word Balal, B-A-L-A-L. That's the English transliteration, which means confusion. Okay? And so basically there's this story of this town, this village, this place, Babel, who was belouled when God struck them. You with me? It's a play on words. The Bible loves to do that, the little play on words things. And so he confused them, Belial, at Babel. And so it's kind of a, you with me? So basically, they built the city, they built the tower, and God says, nope, you're not going to do that. And he belies Bavel. But there are a couple of things about this that is important. That first of all was the technology. This was the first time that they had used specifically cut bricks. That technology allowed them to build a bigger, more stable, higher tower. You with me on that? I mean, it's hard to build a tower out of rocks, right? I mean, you can build a stack of rocks, but you can't really build a tower. It doesn't really work that way. And so you can kind of make a pile of rocks, but you can't really, you with me? And so that technology of specifically cut bricks allowed them to build something bigger, taller, more stable. In addition to that, there's something about being higher up and looking down on everything else. Somebody tell me, what's the highest building you've ever been on? Somebody, anybody. Empire State Building. And when you're up on this high building, think about whatever the highest place you've ever been, and everybody can think of something different, but you're looking down. How does it look down there? Does it look different? You know, little bitty matchbox cars and little bitty ant people running around. And even though you're not any different, your perspective changes. Is that fair? And you look down literally, but you also look down a little bit figuratively because you feel removed from all that stuff down there. Now, why else would a different perspective make a difference? Why else would it be important to get up high? There's some answers in the text. If you want to turn over to Genesis 11, they'll give you some answers as to why they're doing that. But I mean, we can pretty much make some jumps from what we know about this. Why is being up high? Because you're in the heavens. And why is that important? That's where God is. Remember, you got to think like this is way back in I don't know, but way back. Okay, just bear with me. But you know, we don't have this understanding of cosmos and space and atmosphere and all this stuff. God's in the heavens, and so it would make sense logically that the closer I can get to the heavens, the closer I can get to God. Right? That's not a big logical jump. You know, we look at it from our 21st century mindset and go, well, that's silly. Okay, but you're putting the wrong emphasis on there, and you're looking at this scientifically instead of sociologically. Fair? So the closer you are to heaven, the closer you are to God. So this tower is not just a fortification. Maybe it's something else. Why would you want to be closer to God? The higher up you are, the more authority you have. The CEO has the corner office on the penthouse or whatever, right? I buy that. But circle back around here. Why would I want to be closer to God or the gods or whatever, however you wanted to look at that? Why would that be important? So I could be one, feel more holy. So maybe this tower is more than just some kind of fortification. I was always taught this story that these people got together, they built a tower because they wanted to make a name for themselves. That's what they say, right? That's what it says in the text. They want to make a name for themselves. They want a better reputation. And because of that, God makes them all speak a different language. And it never made a lick of sense to me. Because, I mean, there's so many questions in that. So maybe this is more than just I want to be famous. Maybe there's something else going on here. Maybe this tower is also a temple. In Mesopotamia, there's relics and findings from archaeologists about these ziggurats You ever heard of that? They're tower temples. And they have a little circular staircase that goes all the way around them. And up on top of that temple is where they would offer their sacrifices, and they would, because that was putting them closer to the gods. So, if your city had the highest temple, the highest tower, then you would be the closest to God or the gods. So now it's a spiritual connotation here. This is not just, oh, we want to be famous. This is, we want to be the special favored people. Does that make sense? So, yes, sir. Absolutely. And that's a very good point. We think of special favored people, we think that will be God's favorites, but they wanted to make a name for themselves. They're trying to really be their own God and to set themselves up as their own object of worship. Is that, I mean, that's it. I think our minds do weird things with those words, but it's still the basic idea. So I've been off my notes, so I got to catch back up with where I'm at. So this area, right, is very flat in Mesopotamia. So a giant tower you would be able to see from everywhere, right? And so everybody who saw that, any relation to that in the distance or whatever, that's how you make a name for yourselves, right? That they're going to be that's the Tower of Babel. That's the tower of this place. So it's a sacred space. It is a temple. It is a place of worship, both of the gods, but more so themselves. The name of the city in our English translations is always Babel, Bavel. But this word is used throughout the rest of the Old Testament. The only place it's translated Babel or Bavel is right here in Genesis 11. Everywhere else that it's used in the Old Testament, you know how it's translated? Babylon. So now get your head around this. Because when we think Babylon, we go back to Daniel chapter, Daniel 7, Daniel, some of those, and that's, we think of the exile and all that stuff. This is pre-Abraham, and it's still Babylon. So Babylon is the place where the third rebellion happens. Babylon is the place where all these other gods set themselves up as gods, all these other spiritual beings that are of the nations have set themselves up as gods deserving of worship, gods deserving of praise, the place of Yahweh. You with me? And so now, fast forward, we're here at Revelation 17. Really, it's 16 is the first time it's mentioned, but right there's Babylon. So Babylon is the great prostitute, the mother of prostitutes. Now, with a spiritual mindset now, take the carnal out of it and think about it from a spiritual mindset. What does the mother of prostitutes mean about a place where all the nations chased after other gods? You see it? Adultery throughout the Bible is used. When God talks about adultery, he's generally talking about idolatry. He's talking about whether it's idolizing myself or idolizing some other being or some other god or some other nation or whatever. And so the mother of prostitutes, the mother of adultery is Babylon. That's the place where all of it began. Does that make sense? And so now, when we're coming in here to Revelation 17, why do you think this understanding, if we see Babylon as this place where idolatry, adultery, all those spiritual prostitution started, how does that change what's happening, how we understand Revelation? How does that maybe make it make a little more sense? You don't have to answer. I'll take it if you got one. But how does that make it make a little more sense? Well, it's the home turf of evil. And Genesis, the beginning, the fall, we have the three rebellions. Human depravity takes root in humankind. And then the very next chapter, Babel is 11, the very next chapter 12 is where God says, okay, I'm washing my hands of the whole bunch of you. I'm going to start right here with this one dude, and I'm going to raise up my own nation through him. Why? So that through him all nations can be blessed. Remember when we talked about Galatians? Paul says the law is given not because he thought it was going to make people holy, but because he's going to stave off that human depravity long enough that he can raise up a people through whom God can enter creation and make everything right. And so he's making this plan right here in Genesis 12 at Babel, at that moment, and then he's moving forward. So here at the end, when you're going to wrap everything up, it would make sense that you have to take out that Babel, that third rebellion, that Babylon. So Babylon goes all the way back to the beginning. I mean, you go back to the way before Abraham. Babylon was a place. I mean, we have records of the Code of Hammurabi, and a lot of that's all from Babylon, way back there, and so this is not something that just that just pops up in Daniel, and then that John uses as a metaphor for Rome in Revelation. Instead, this is the human condition. This is not just the birthplace of evil, but this is all the things that make humanity seduced away from Yahweh are connected to this. You with me so far? And so this all peoples and nations and languages, I mean, he's going to say that over because that just means everybody. And so there's this thing of evil, this personification of collective evil, and it's where Israel, it's where not Israel, but it's where Yahweh is. There's going to be this final battle. There's going to be this final battle for who is going to be the Most High. Is it Yahweh who is the Most High, or is it Baal, Moloch, I don't know, insert God's name here? You with me? And so there's this final battle that's going to take place, and that final battle is going to take place at this place called Har Mogeddon. Right? Armageddon? You've heard that, right? That's the Hebrew. Har means mountain. And throughout translations, everybody always says it's Megiddo, that there's going to be this place. I mean, you read any of the end times understanding systems, it's either going to be a spiritual battle that takes place at the city of Megiddo, or it's going to be a spiritual battle that takes place on the plain of Megiddo, or it's going to be all the nations of the earth come together with their tanks and helicopters at the place of Megiddo. And the problem with that is none of it really makes sense scripturally. Megiddo is not a mountain. There is no Mount Megiddo. There's nothing. It doesn't exist. There's a hill where the city's been built and rebuilt over time, but it's not really a mountain. So that Mount Megiddo doesn't make sense. And we don't have time to get into this a lot, but I want to. We got to get this because it makes everything else make sense. There is, Zechariah 12 tells us that Jerusalem is going to be the place of the final battle. Zechariah 12, verse 9 through 11, on that day I will set out to destroy all the nations that attack Jerusalem. I'll pour out on the house of David and the inhabitants of Jerusalem a spirit of grace and supplication. They'll look on me, the one they have pierced, and they will mourn for him as one mourns for an only child, and grieve bitterly for him as one grieves for a firstborn son. On that day, the weeping in Jerusalem will be as great as the weeping of Hadad Ramon in the plain of Megiddo. So Zechariah says it's going to be Jerusalem, not Megiddo as far as location. Because, why? Jerusalem is a mountain. Jerusalem is called Mount what? Zion. You get the cookie. Mount Zion is what? The place where God reigns, right? It's the place where God sits in council. And so it would make sense if there's going to be a battle that's where the battle's going to be fought, right? That it would be at the place where God is reigning, because all these other things are trying to unseat God, Yahweh, from being the Most High. The third thing, and this is a little bit technical. I'm going to try to do it real quick because we're running out of time, but we need this. Because in Hebrew, Megiddo is a transliteration. That means they took a Hebrew word and they put in English letters so that we could say it and make sense. Because otherwise, if we tried to say it, there'd be a lot of spit and phlegm and stuff, and it doesn't. We don't get that. The problem is that G in Megiddo could be the Hebrew letter, or it could be another Hebrew letter that's just like an apostrophe. And the problem is that could be rewritten. It could be two different words. It could be Megiddo, or it could be another word, Moed. Now, Moed means assembly. So, Mount Megiddo being a mountain somehow in the plain of Megiddo, or the Mount of Assembly, that sounds more like Mount Zion, which Zechariah says is going to be the place of the final battle. And at that final battle, what's going to happen? The forces of Yahweh, the forces of Babylon, all the evil that's going on out here, are going to throw down to see who will be the Most High. Now, don't let that scare you. Because we get all this end time stuff and, what's going to happen and we're going to be left behind and all. Don't worry about that. That's not important. Because God fighting these evil spirits, that's like me fighting an anthill. I'm going to smush them. It's not a big deal. I'm not going to lose sleep over that. And too many times we get to wringing our hands and, I'm so angry. I mean, when I was a kid, I was terrified, that there was going to be, I was going to be taken away, and my parents were going to be taken away. And maybe because I had these thoughts the night before, I was going to wake up and my parents were going to be raptured or something. And I told you I'm a Bible nerd. That's the stuff that runs through my head. But the point is, that's not what we need to be scared of, worried about, because if we are in Christ, our name is already written in the book of life. We're already on the winning side. And there's not even a fight. It's not even a battle. So much more I want us to cover. I want to take this opportunity to encourage you. Wednesday night, Classroom C. We're at 17:18, so we're the last 3 chapters of Revelation. And if you're going to come to any of the 3 chapters of Revelation, that's the good stuff. All right? There's not demons and dragons and all. God wins. And everything is made right. If you're going to come, man, that's the ones you want to see, because that's where the payoff happens. Wednesday night, 6:30, we'll be in classroom C. You can come in and Tim is going to wrap this all. He left. I was going to mess with him. He's going to wrap this all up in a nice little package, and you're going to understand everything when you're done. Thank you very much for your participation. I know we were a little bit technical for 9 o'clock on a Sunday morning, but I appreciate you. This is important for us to get this wrapped up and to understand that all this stuff that we've been talking about, God's going to make right. God already has decided it's going to be made right. There's nothing that they can do to change that. God wins the end. All right? So let's worship him this morning. We're going to have now 12 minutes to go and shake hands, hug necks, and take care of some business. Be right back in here at 10 o'clock for worship. Thank you.